Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It is quite a pleasure, and I would say an honor, to be invited to speak to this excellent group of people. We all have something in common. We're interested in the EEA agreement. I am a self-proclaimed EEA nerd, actually, and this is one of my favorite days of the year. So this is my little Christmas. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. So I work as an officer in the coordination, the EEA coordination division here in the EFTA Secretariat in Brussels. I've been here for about 1 year. I've learned a lot, and I'm going to share some of that knowledge with you here today. I hope after this session, I have two objectives. Number one, explain to you why my job is actually the most important job of anyone here, you know. No, I'm joking. We're all very important. And secondly, make sure that nobody starts to snore. I know it's been a long day, and I really hope that you're enjoying, but I know from sitting in these seminars myself, it can get quite tiring, at least, especially towards the end. So I'll discuss, as you can see on the screen, the MP, so members of parliament, social partners, and local and regional representation. You said externals. I wouldn't quite say externals, because we're, of course, part of the EFTA family and the EEA family, an integral part. But yes, we have a slightly different role. What we've been discussing so far is the role of the government, really, and extensions of government. So we've been talking about, expert groups. We've been talking about the ministries for foreign affairs, what they do, and then the sort of cabinets and so forth. But now we're going to go sort of more into what the others are doing outside that group. So this is the broad outline of what we're going to discuss today. We're going to start with just a brief introduction of the advisory bodies, what they are, what's their purpose, what's the role, what's their mandate. I would be very happy if after this presentation you would just be aware or know what they are. I would be quite happy. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the parliamentary scrutiny. So I am actually the officer for the social partners element of the advisory body. So social partners is the employers and employees. We'll go into that. And then also the regional and local aspects of the EEA cooperation. Christoph, my colleague who just entered the room here, he's the officer responsible for the Parliamentary Committee, which I help with as well. Yeah, I'm going to start with this. Here, this is something you haven't seen before. I'm sure you've seen a lot of pictures of the two-pillar structure and whatnot, but this is something new because this is what is going on in Geneva, actually, more than here in Brussels. So this is the EFTA Council, and the advisory bodies, they have existed for a very long time. And because before the EEA agreement, there actually was something called EFTA, as a free trade association, and these two bodies in the beginning were set up actually already in the 60s. So they have a very long life, are quite a lot older than the other committees we're talking about. But their role in the beginning was quite different to what their role is today. And when they were set up under this structure of the sort of EFTA Council. The EFTA Council is similar to the Standing Committee here in Brussels. And then you see a lot of different committees in this graph, but we're going to focus in on these two, Parliamentary Committee and Consultative Committee, and then the local and regional authorities, which come later on as well. The EFTA Parliamentary Committee, it's in the name. It's no rocket science. It's a group of parliamentarians that meet to discuss. First, they were discussing EFTA-related matters, but now also EEA-related matters. Then the Consultative Committee, which I spend my time working on, is a forum for the representatives of the trade unions and the business and employers associations of the EFTA states. So what do they do? Okay, they have a twofold role. So I'm one of the few people here in Brussels in the EFTA Secretariat that is actually both sort of observing and seeing what is going on the EU side and then working on the EEA agreement. But I'm also working on third country issues. What is third country issues? It's trade-related matters. So this is part of the jargon they use in Geneva. So this was the original role of the two committees, but now today they have another role, an added bonus, which is the EEA agreement. And that is also quite significant and time-consuming in their work. Aha! I'm also going to show you the two-pillar system, the structure here, which is maybe no surprise to you. But I'm not going to talk about the top, because you already know all about that by now if you follow today. And I'm going to apologize as well. I might use a lot of abbreviations. I'm going to try not to do it, but it's in the nature of the work that jargon and abbreviations are a part of this. But if you don't know what the EEA is by now, then maybe we're not doing such a good job. So I'll use that. I'll use the EEA. I'm safe to do that. So we have here two pillars. Some might actually say three pillars, because we have one in the middle as well, which is important, but we're sticking to the two-pillar structure. We have on one side the EFTA Parliamentary Committee, and on the other side there are counterparts in the EU, which is the European Parliament. Similarly with the EFTA Consultative Committee, we have the Economic and Social Committee, the EESC, for those into the Brussels slang, and then finally the EEA-EFTA Forum. And you see we also have two joint committees with the European Parliament and also with the Economic and Social Committee. And these are the EEA Joint Parliamentary Committee and the EEA Consultative Committee. Now, I think we want to start with the Parliamentary Committee, which is a formal body established under the EEA agreement. And I think it's important to note that in the EEA agreement, when it was originally signed, they foresaw a role for parliamentary sort of consultation. They saw a role of in Article 95, to be exact, of a committee established on one part on the EFTA side with parliamentarians from Iceland, Liechtenstein and Norway, and then the Swiss as observers to this committee actually as well. And then on the other side, a group of parliamentarians from the European Parliament, MEPs. The EFTA side, or the EEA-EFTA side, is actually the group of parliamentarians varies between countries in the delegations. And they are basically representatives from their own national parliaments. For example, they're from the Storting in Norway. They have a specific committee in Norway, which is the EFTA delegation. So they choose themselves who they send to the meetings of the EEA Joint Parliamentary Committee, and so forth and so on with the other countries. And they actually meet twice a year formally in meetings. Here you can see a lovely picture taken in the Storting. Actually, we were hosted in Norway by the excellent hosts of the Storting, and this was the 57th meeting. There were a lot of very good and lively discussions there, and currently the chairman is Ms. Ingibjörg Ólöf Isaksen, who's chairing on the EFTA side, and there was Christopher Grutler, which is a member of the European Parliament. What does this committee do? Well, they have a very important role because they are the parliamentary scrutiny. They are the ones to advise the governments on parliamentary matters. They're the formal channel to the governments through the EEA agreement. So they are monitoring very closely the legislative developments on the EU side, and not only after, like we've heard here today, we've heard about the importance of early assessment, of getting in sort of at the start of the first stop of the train, not go on, to try to influence EU policy when the train is already at the 5th or 6th station. And this is what the Parliamentary Committee does as well. And then it also can express its views according to the EEA agreement in form of resolutions or reports. yearly, on a yearly basis, they issue at least one sort of opinion on the development of the EEA agreement. And also, a lot of the work takes place in these meetings. As you can see, a lot of different topics are discussed, and the debates held among the members of Parliament on the EU side and the EFTA parliamentarians. Now we go to this committee, which is the social partners. Also very important, I would say equally important, but I might be a bit biased because I work with this committee. But these partners, social partners, they're also foreseen to have a role in the formal EEA agreement. So Article 96, the article after 95, it references the social partners especially, and this is sort of based on actually the Treaty of Rome originally saw a special role for the social partners. And on the EU side, we have the European Economic and Social Committee, which is still going strong. And here we're sort of, in many ways, shadowing the work of that committee. There's a slight difference, though. I think there are more than one, I think probably around 200 employees on the EESC, but I'm alone, more or less, with the support from colleagues dealing with this EFTA Consultative Committee. Very similar tasks and objectives of the EFTA Consultative Committee and the Parliamentary Committee. It's following, monitoring EU legislative developments, sometimes in more particular field. That I think the main difference between the two committees, except for the parliamentarians actually being elected and the representatives of employers and employees being selected, I guess, or working on these matters. They, the main difference is that they're more sort of, they have expertise on certain matters like social policy, for example. Labor unions have a greater interest in particular areas, and businesses have a greater interest in other particular areas. So there's a lot of expertise in this committee, and we similarly also express views in form of reports and resolutions. We have a yearly meeting with the representatives, our counterparts on the EU side, the European Economic and Social Committee. This picture is actually not from that meeting, but rather something that happens outside the formal work or formal meeting of the EEACC. But we meet, last time was in Bergen. Very nice meeting in May. It rained a lot in Bergen. And we discussed, for example, the committee adopted 2 resolutions. One resolution was on the social implications of sort of the Fit for 55, the new EU climate law, which has become now an even hotter topic due to the energy crisis. And the second one was on artificial intelligence in work life. So we try to be quite sort of on the ball as well when it comes to adopting resolutions, trying to impact policy areas that have a special reference for the areas of the social partners. And then finally, and very importantly, the local and regional authorities. They were not foreseen actually in the EEA agreement, due to the fact that when it was being negotiated, the EU did not yet have any specific sort of organization for regional and local authorities on their side. Now they have the European Committee of the Regions, and I think it was just, if I'm not wrong, it was established very shortly after the signing of the EEA agreement. But since it wasn't there yet, the local and regional authorities, they didn't get their own formal forum until 2009, when the EEA EFTA states they established this forum by a decision of the EFTA Standing Committee. And as the name sort of implies, they have elected representatives, so local and municipal and regional councillors, city councillors from towns, small villages, from both Iceland and Norway. Switzerland is an observer here as well, and Liechtenstein, well, they decided not to take part in this because mainly, yes, they didn't quite have the capacity or the administrative capacity to do so. And they also meet once a year. The next meeting will be in December here in Brussels. And they also, outside the formal meetings, have informal links established with the European Committee of the Regions. They also formulate views in forms of opinions. The last opinion was on the Adequate Minimum Wage Directive, which has a massive impact also on the local and municipal authorities. And I think what I also want to say about this organization or this committee is that the impact of EEA policies has had a massive impact on our local, municipal and regional governments. And this is something that we're seeing more and more of. And just to name one example, the entire climate legislation, the packages coming from the EU, a lot of the implementation on the ground will be in the hands of local and regional authorities. So, outside the formal meetings, we're never idle. We're never idle here, these committees, they have a lot of fun. And in Article 9, on the agreement of the Standing Committee of the EFTA States, there is actually a clause on consultation between the Standing Committee, which can be either at the highest level, the ministers of the EFTA states, or the ambassadors also. And that is done in practice. The committees meet at various meetings with representatives of the Standing Committee. We meet yearly with EEA EFTA foreign ministers, both the Parliamentary Committee and Consultative Committee, together with the EEA EFTA ministers to discuss important EEA-related topics. Furthermore, the EFTA Consultative Committee meets with the EEA EFTA ambassadors springtime, so it's quite nice. And there is sort of an ongoing consultation always. You know, when we have reports, we send it to the representatives of the Standing Committee. If we have some particular issue to address, we send it to the representatives of the Standing Committee. So this has become a growing field in the EFTA pillar for the sort of Consultative Committee to liaise with relevant people on the side of the sort of governing bodies. So just to name a few sort of topics that have been discussed in all of the advisory bodies and in some of the formal resolutions and opinions of the advisory bodies. Of course, climate change and the green transition are of massive importance. A lot of the discussions in the Parliamentary Committee are around that now. Renewable energy directive, the Fit for 55 package as a whole has been discussed in almost all of these committees that I've mentioned, and I could count on CBAM also features quite highly. Then what Trond works on actually, the digital. He's quite a good friend of ours. We call him into meeting every once in a while to explain to us the complexities of AI regulations or something like. We have no idea how it works, so we're very thankful for that. And this has been of great interest, and the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act have been of interest, and the AI regulation and more and more. And then finally, the social policy developments. The European Pillar of Social Rights was adopted relatively recently on the EU side, 2017, and this has been of great interest, especially to the EFTA Consultative Committee, because there you have the social partners, but also, for example, the regional and local authorities and the parliamentarians. So there are many topics that we follow carefully, and it's important. And that is what I want to bring out in the sort of final remarks that I have, is that this is important. These committees are important because these are the committees that are the formal forum and the communication channel with the political, economic, social, and civil society circles in the EFTA member states. So this is really what is foreseen in the EEA agreement, in our case, to be of essential importance in also shaping policies, and also in discussing with partners on the EU side. And I think it's fair to say that these committees have grown in importance, not only due to the signing of the EEA agreement, but also you see developments on the EU side, the increased importance of the European Parliament, for example, has sort of also given us some impetus or drive to do even more on our side. And then this is really the section of the EEA which is not just dealt with by government officials or ministers. This is, elected representatives on the local level, in the parliament. These are the social partners working for companies and for labor unions, etc. So this is really a crucial part of the puzzle, that is the EEA agreement. And the goal is for these committees to provide increased democratic accountability and legitimacy to the EEA agreement, which I think everyone here can agree is quite an important task in these days. So I thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Petur. So, yes, we will open up for questions now for both Petur and Ron. And Ron, I'm sorry, we stole your mic, so you can have this one.
You're off?
I'm off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on. Too many things to remember. So, any questions in the audience? Yes. Here we go. Petur, I think you're about to get roasted.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both for your presentations. My question has to do with the Parliamentary Committee. You mentioned slightly how the European Parliament has increased in importance. I'm wondering how exactly has this affected the Joint Parliamentary Committee's work? Do they meet more often, or how does this has this affected it?
Okay. So first of all, I would say it's very nice to have powerful friends. And I think it helps when the European Parliament becomes more powerful in the EU decision-making process. They're our formal and natural counterparts on the EU side. You also asked whether it had changed the frequency of the meetings of the EEA Joint Parliamentary Committee. It is foreseen to meet 2 times per year in the EEA agreement. So no, that has not formally changed. However, there have been efforts on the EFTA pillar to increase the role and the mandate of the EFTA Parliamentary Committee, and there have been strides and efforts in increasing just the activity of the EFTA Parliamentary Committee, also in scrutiny and advising on the EEA agreement. So this is the formal forum to do that, and I think everyone understands the importance in the EFTA pillar as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final? We have one other question. Here we go.
Sorry, don't want to keep people.
No,
Daniela, Mission of Liechtenstein. I have a question that somehow to both of you. So I was wondering, in the EFTA comments, when you say you're following during the trilogues and kind of the development phase of a new act, I imagine it's easier to follow during the council sessions, right? Because we have experts with some kind of access. How do you do the same while the act is in Parliament?
Yes, start to answer this. I mean, it is challenging, of course, because we are not there, basically, around the table. What we can do is, of course, is to follow closely the information that is circulating in the Brussels body. There's quite a lot of drafts flying around, and a lot of stakeholders have access to, of course. The other option is to actually sit down and talk to someone in Parliament, for instance. The assistants, for instance, to the MPs, or someone in the Secretariat, for instance, are quite a good partner sometimes to have contact with and to talk to. So we do that. We use the opportunities we have, certainly, but of course always the information flow is a challenge for us. So we need to play on all the strengths available to us, basically.
Maybe if I could just add one thing, I think the European Parliament is a relatively transparent place. There's a lot of open information, which is then also very readily available to EFTA. And I think what we could look into, Trond, this brings to mind an idea. Actually, the question, what we could do is when we have MPs discussing, because we have had discussions on various acts relating to, for example, your field in the digital field, for you to follow the discussions, etc. So I think, yeah, we could work together a little bit more as well. A very good question, actually.